I've had a great career, and if I had to do one thing different, I think I would have kept writing, and where I quit writing for years and I got lazy about that. I really wasn't inspired to write, and for more than 3 decades George Strait carefully guarded a secret that no one ever suspected. Behind the spotless image of country music's most respected legend, another life was quietly unfolding. Even those closest to him were unaware of what was really happening beyond the spotlight. Now the truth is finally emerging, and it's rewriting everything fans thought they knew. Born George Harvey Strait on May 18, 1952, in the small town of Foote, Texas. George Strait's early years were shaped by the rhythms of rural life and the quiet discipline of farm work. He was raised primarily in nearby Pearsall, where his family owned and worked a cattle farm. Life there was demanding and often unforgiving, requiring long hours, physical endurance, and a deep respect for responsibility, values that would later become inseparable from Strait's personality and music. When his parents divorced during his childhood, George and his brother were raised by their father, a junior high school mathematics teacher who balanced education with the daily realities of running a farm. That combination of structure and labor instilled in Strait a sense of humility and perseverance that never left him. Music entered his life gradually rather than dramatically. As a teenager in the late 1960s, Strait was drawn to the sounds of traditional country, especially the smooth storytelling of artists like Hank Williams, Merle Haggard, and George Jones. While many young musicians chased trends, Strait found comfort in classic melodies and straightforward lyrics that reflected real life. In high school, he briefly played in a rock and roll garage band, but his heart consistently returned to country music's emotional honesty and simplicity. After graduating from Pearsall High School, Strait enrolled in college, but soon interrupted his studies to serve in the U.S. Army in the early 1970s. Stationed in Hawaii, he joined an Army-sponsored country band called Rambling Country, performing for fellow servicemen and local audiences. Those performances marked his first real experience on stage and quietly confirmed that music was more than a hobby. When he returned to Texas later in the decade and resumed college, Strait carried with him not only sharpened musical instincts, but also a deepened maturity, one forged by discipline, distance from home, and a lifelong connection to his roots. In December 1971, at just 19 years old, George Strait married his high school sweetheart Norma Strait, beginning a quiet, steadfast partnership that would become the emotional backbone of his life. Unlike many public figures whose relationships were shaped by fame, George and Norma built their marriage long before success entered the picture. Their bond was rooted in shared history, mutual trust, and a deep understanding of each other's values, qualities that helped sustain them through decades of change. Only a year later, in 1972, the couple welcomed their first child, a daughter named Jennifer. Fatherhood arrived early for Strait, forcing him to mature quickly while still searching for his place in the world. At the time, he was balancing young family responsibilities with military service and uncertain career prospects, often putting stability ahead of ambition. Those early years were far from glamorous, defined more by sacrifice than opportunity. Yet, they strengthened his devotion to home life. Family was never an accessory to success. It was the foundation. As Strait pursued music more seriously in the late 1970s, the demands on his time increased. Long drives, small venues, and modest pay became part of daily life. But Norma remained a steady presence, offering support without seeking attention. She avoided the spotlight entirely, preferring privacy over public recognition. And George respected that boundary throughout his career. Their marriage became a rare constant in an industry known for instability. In 1981, the couple welcomed their son, George Bubba Strait, Jr., further solidifying their family unit just as George's career was beginning to gain momentum. Despite the growing pressures of fame, Strait consistently drew a clear line between his professional and personal worlds. He chose family dinners over nightlife, home over Hollywood, and loyalty over excess. This unwavering commitment to marriage and fatherhood not only grounded him personally, but also shaped the sincerity and emotional restraint that would later define his music and public image. June 25, 1986 marked a devastating turning point in George Strait's life. On that summer day in San Marcos, Texas, his 13-year-old daughter, Jennifer Strait, was killed in a catastrophic car accident that shattered the family's sense of normalcy and forever altered Strait's private world. Jennifer had been riding in a Ford Mustang driven by a friend when the vehicle lost control, rolled over, and crashed violently. During the accident, she was partially ejected from the car and died instantly. Investigators later confirmed that none of the occupants were wearing seat belts, a detail that only deepened the tragedy. For George and Norma Strait, the loss was incomprehensible. Jennifer had been the couple's first child and the quiet center of their family life, a presence that grounded George long before fame arrived. In an instant, that foundation was torn away. Those closest to the family described a period of profound grief and withdrawal as the Straits retreated inward to mourn privately. Unlike many public figures who process tragedy in the public eye, George made a deliberate choice to protect his family from scrutiny. In the years following Jennifer's death, George Strait largely stopped giving interviews, avoided personal questions, and distanced himself from the media almost entirely. His silence was not an act of detachment, but one of survival. Music remained his outlet. Yet even then he rarely spoke directly about his loss, allowing emotion to surface only subtly through tone and restraint rather than explicit confession. This reserved approach would later become a defining trait of his public persona. The tragedy also reshaped Strait's priorities. Fame, accolades, and commercial success faded in importance compared to preserving what remained of his family. In 1986, the Jennifer Lynn Strait Memorial Foundation was later established to support children's charities, quietly honoring her memory without spectacle. Though time moved forward, the loss never truly left him. Instead, it became a silent companion, one that deepened his humility, strengthened his devotion to privacy, and infused his life and music with a gravity earned through unimaginable pain. In 1987, less than a year after the devastating loss of their daughter, George and Norma Strait made a deeply personal decision to transform grief into purpose by co-founding the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation. Rather than seeking public attention or grand recognition, the foundation was created quietly, reflecting the family's enduring preference for privacy. Its mission was simple but profound: to support children's charities and provide help to young people facing hardship, illness, or instability, causes that held new meaning after Jennifer's death. For the Straits, the foundation became a living tribute to Jennifer's memory, allowing her name to be associated not with tragedy, but with compassion and hope. George and Norma viewed the work not as a single act of charity, but as a lifelong commitment. The foundation focused on organizations that directly improved children's lives, including those addressing healthcare, education, and basic needs, often within Texas communities close to the family's roots. By choosing this path, they ensured that Jennifer's spirit would continue to make a difference far beyond their own family. True to George Strait's reserved nature, the foundation operated largely outside the spotlight. Fundraising efforts were often tied to benefit concerts, private donations, and discreet partnerships rather than high-profile campaigns. Strait rarely spoke publicly about the foundation, allowing the work itself to carry meaning without emotional explanation. This quiet approach underscored the sincerity behind the effort. It was never about public image, but about remembrance and responsibility. Over the years, the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation has donated millions of dollars to children's causes, becoming one of the most enduring aspects of Strait's legacy beyond music. For George and Norma, the foundation offered no closure. Such a loss allows none. But it provided a way to channel sorrow into service. Through each child helped and each organization supported, Jennifer's name continued to represent kindness, resilience, and the enduring love of a family determined to honor her life by helping others. In April 2009, George Strait faced another deeply personal loss with the death of his older brother, John Byron "Buddy" Strait, who passed away on April 10 at the age of 58. While the tragedy did not unfold under the same public glare as the loss of his daughter decades earlier, it struck a profoundly sensitive place in George's life. Buddy was not just a sibling, but a constant presence throughout George's formative years. Someone who shared the same rural upbringing, family struggles, and early lessons learned on the hard ground of Texas soil. Growing up in Pearsall, Texas, the Strait brothers were shaped together by farm life, responsibility, and resilience. Buddy had witnessed George long before the spotlight, before sold-out arenas, and record-breaking chart runs when life revolved around chores, school, and the quiet expectations of a working family. That shared history created a bond built less on words and more on experience. For George, losing Buddy meant losing one of the last living links to his earliest self. Unlike public milestones or career triumphs, this loss unfolded privately. George did not issue public statements or give interviews reflecting on his grief. Those closest to him noted that he processed the loss in the same way he always had, with restraint, reflection, and an instinct to protect his personal life. The death of his brother reinforced his long-held belief that family mattered more than fame and that grief did not need an audience to be real. Following the tragic death of his daughter Jennifer in 1986, George Strait made a defining decision that would shape the rest of his life and career. He chose privacy over publicity. At a time when his fame was rapidly expanding and the music industry increasingly demanded personal access, Strait deliberately withdrew from media exposure. He rarely granted interviews, avoided discussing his emotions, and drew a firm boundary between his public role as an artist and his private identity as a husband and father. This choice was not effortless. Country music, especially at the height of its commercial boom, thrived on storytelling, not just in song, but in personality. Fans and journalists wanted insight into the man behind the voice. Yet, Strait resisted that expectation. Protecting his family became a form of emotional self-preservation, a way to grieve without reopening wounds. Silence for him was not distance. It was survival. Still carrying grief quietly came with its own weight, as there were few outlets beyond music where his pain could safely exist. The strain of maintaining privacy in an industry built on visibility required discipline. Strait limited public appearances, declined talk shows, and focused on performing rather than promoting himself. His concerts became the primary space where he connected with audiences, allowing the music to speak in place of confession. Over time, this restraint became part of his mystique, earning him respect as an artist who let authenticity replace spectacle. Despite the challenges, Strait's approach preserved a sense of normalcy at home. His marriage to Norma remained intact, and his son Bubba was raised away from celebrity culture. By refusing to trade personal loss for public sympathy, George Strait redefined success on his own terms. His quiet dignity in the face of fame demonstrated that restraint could coexist with greatness and that sometimes the most powerful statement an artist can make is choosing what not to share. In 2024, George Strait faced another profoundly emotional chapter as he navigated a season of professional creativity alongside deep personal loss. That year marked the release of his album Cowboys and Dreamers in September 2024, a project shaped not only by reflection and maturity, but by grief. As the album neared completion, Strait lost three men who had been pillars of his life on the road. Trusted colleagues whose presence had defined decades of touring, rehearsing, and shared silence between shows. On March 20, 2024, Strait's longtime fiddle player, Gene Elders, passed away, followed the same day by the death of his legendary manager, of Woolsey. Just weeks later, on April 29, 2024, his road manager, Tom Foote, also died. These were not distant professional relationships. They were bonds forged through years of travel, loyalty, and mutual trust. Together, they had shaped the sound, structure, and stability of Strait's touring life, often spending more time together than with their own families. For Strait, the losses were cumulative and deeply personal. Of Woolsey had guided his career from its earliest days, helping him navigate fame while preserving his values. Gene Elders's fiddle had been a signature element of Strait's live sound, while Tom Foote ensured the quiet order behind every performance. Their absence left an emotional and logistical void that could not be easily replaced. In response, Strait did what he has always done. He honored them quietly. Cowboys and Dreamers was dedicated to their memory, not as a public display of grief, but as a lasting acknowledgement of friendship and gratitude. The dedication underscored a truth that has followed Strait throughout his life. His career was never built alone. In 2024, as he stood at a reflective point in his journey, the album became both a farewell and a tribute, an enduring reminder that behind every legend stands a family of voices, hands, and hearts now deeply